Welcome back to Sailing El Jaleo. Last week we had crossed St. Simon Sound and we went up the Frederica River where we anchored next to Fort Frederica. This week we're going to wait out a little bit of bad weather at Fort Frederica. I have a problem with that word. Before continuing our journey north. This week we're going to cross Altemaha, Doby, and Sapelo Sounds, and we're going to make stops at Sapelo Island and St. Catherine's Island. I guess we might as well go ahead and get right into it. Grab a drink, climb aboard, and let's get going. Before we go ahead and get into it, I do need your guys' help real quick. The program that I use to record the audio for these videos is OBS. It's a very popular program. Anyway, I just updated it and I'm listening back to the audio that I recorded for the intro and it sounds like absolute garbage. And I don't know if it's my computer speakers or if they changed something in the programming. So can you guys let me know, does this video, the audio, sound different than previous ones? Does it sound really tinny? To me it sounds very tinny. So if you can just leave a comment down below and let me know if it's okay or if it's garbage, I might need to find a different program. So let me know. I'd appreciate it. Thank you. We did end up spending a few days at Fort Frederica, waiting out some bad weather, and I've done videos in the past on Fort Frederica, so I'm not going to show it much here. I'll put a link in the description down below if you want more information about that. But for once, it was nice. The lightning was in the distance. We didn't have any local lightning to us. If you look on the horizon, you should see some lightning on the right-hand side of the screen. We did have some rain, but rain is always welcome. You know, EJ's decks can use a good rinse every now and again. So we got some rain, but no lightning, which was awesome. After a stormy day, the clouds finally broke and we had a nice, bright, beautiful moon, and it made for a very pleasant evening. The next morning we got up and got back on the road as we headed up the Frederica River to rejoin the Intracoastal Waterway. I love the Frederica River. I do recommend if you ever come through here, don't follow the regular Intracoastal Waterway. Go down the Frederica River. It's only a couple miles longer and it is just stunningly beautiful. You get all of the cord grasses. I wish we could have come through at low tide when the mud banks were exposed and there'd be birds foraging for food on there. I love this area at low tide. The tidal estuaries at low tide are really, really neat. The birds and all the animals that are out there foraging for food is just wonderful. And you don't see a lot of those, or not as many of them at high tide anyway. But we had to get back on the road, so, you know, we don't control the tides. But, you know, just speaking of Georgia, Georgia is my favorite state along the Intracoastal Waterway as far as the whole state goes. Now, of course, the Waccamaw is my favorite place on the East Coast. But as far as just a whole state, Georgia is wonderful. It's extremely rural. You don't see a lot of people. You always feel like you're off the beaten path. You can anchor out in the middle of nowhere and be all by yourself. It's absolutely wonderful. You okay, Hoob? Sorry, Linus was whining there a little bit. But, you know, in the tidal estuaries, you've got all the cord grasses. There are deciduous trees, coniferous trees, and there are palm trees. It's just absolutely wonderful. And we've got all of the different sounds and the barrier islands. It's just a really, really unique place, Georgia is along the coast. It's just stunningly beautiful. If you ever get a chance to check it out, and most of the stuff you can't see without a boat. You know, in the tidal estuaries, it's not like there's access to it with cars. You know, it's something that most of Americans will never see, and it's absolutely beautiful. I just love it. I can't say enough about it. As we were steaming towards Altemaha Sound, we were able to use our head sail a little bit, which is always nice. You know, in the Intracoastal Waterway, you really can't sail that much, and getting the head sail up and down would be impossible. But I do have the head sail on a rolling furler, so I am able to get that up and down as we go through the Intracoastal Waterway. And you really couldn't sail for most of it. There are large, you know, North Carolina, you could do a lot of sailing. But in most of these small rivers and streams, you just really couldn't. There's no room for tacking, and you know, you're constantly changing directions, so it's not very practical to sail in a lot of the Intracoastal Waterway. But we always use our head sail every opportunity we get, which is nice. And sometimes it doesn't last. You know, sometimes we only have the head sail up for maybe 5 or 7 minutes, and then, you know, we either have to tack or we just take it down because we're heading into the wind and we're luffing. You know, you change directions quite a few times when you go through the ICW. And I mean, we've put the head sail up and down over 30 times in one day. You know, we do try to utilize the wind as much as we possibly can. It does, you know, EJ is a very slow moving boat. When we're towing the dinghy, this year we've been getting around 3.4 knots in slack water, you know, when there's no currents, which is very slow. Most boats, a lot of boats can go twice that fast, but we can't. You know, you know, this is one thing I'm really unhappy about. Our dinghy is a huge dinghy. It's 12 feet. We love Frank. Frank is great, but I think there's a reason why Frank was on closeout. Dragging Frank, especially with a 15-horse motor behind the boat, is like dragging an anchor. It's really inefficient. I've been looking at different dinghies that have better drag coefficients, you know, that could help us gain some speed. And I'm just exploring different options. You know, we love Frank. Frank is great, but if we can pick up some speed by getting a more efficient dinghy, that would be awesome. I didn't really know what I was doing when I bought Frank. I'm like, well, we need a dinghy, and this one's made out of Hypalon, so it's going to last a long time. And to get a Hypalon dinghy, you know, most of them are around $5,000. This one was on closeout for $2,200. That's why I got it. So it was more than half off, and that should have, you know, I should have had a little warning that something might have been wrong there. But yeah, it's just not very efficient to drag it behind EJ. So, but anyway, we do try and use the head sail as much as humanly possible when we're going up and down the Intracoastal Waterway. If the wind is at the right angle, you know, we can get as much as 2 knots faster just using the head sail, which is increasing our speed by what, about 40%. So, I mean, that's maybe 35%, but it's a significant boost, and it can really cut down on our travel time. That's why we like to utilize the head sail as much as possible. We decided to anchor for the night behind Sapelo Island, and we've never stopped at Sapelo Island before. And when I stop at somewhere new, I like to just get on the interwebs and read about the place, you know, because I don't know anything about it. And Sapelo Island is like a lot of these barrier islands in Georgia. It's only accessible by boat. And because of that fact, the community that lived on Sapelo Island back, you know, in the 1800s was very, very isolated from the rest of the mainland, if you will. And from what I understand, Sapelo Island has the last Gullah community on it. And the Gullah people were, like I said, I'm not an expert on this. This is just what I read a couple months back. But the Gullah people were a subgroup of African Americans who were brought from the African mainland over here, and because they lived on this barrier island and were so isolated, they actually retained a lot of their languages and African traditions and customs, which is really interesting. And the final Gullah community is still on Sapelo Island. And from the news articles that I read, there's an ongoing it's becoming a problem, not that they're there, but that other people are now moving in. So I guess they're building a lot of big, expensive, like vacation homes or, you know, retirement homes along the coast. You know, as the population expands, people want coastal property, and I guess they're kind of taking over Sapelo Island from this community that's lived there for, you know, hundreds of years, which is kind of a shame. And not that different groups of people can't live side by side. I'm not saying that at all. And from what I understand of the issue is that because of all this new construction that's going on and all these new homes that are being built, the tax rates are going up. So a lot of people whose families have lived there for generations are being forced to sell their property because they can't afford the tax, which seems kind of shitty to me. I don't know. It just seems like, I don't know, you could grandfather in some people that have been there for generations. The whole thing just seems, and I understand time marches forward, but it seems like things like that could be handled a little more delicately and just with some, I don't know, with some grace maybe. You know, and I don't know anything about the whole thing, but there was a real tragedy that happened there. It was only 5 or 6 months ago. It was at the end of 2024. They were having a Gullah Geechee festival, And the ferry that takes people back and forth to the island, there's a gangway on it that you get off the ferry up to the land, and a gangway collapsed when a bunch of people were on it. And from what I understand, it was primarily older people, like in their 70s and 80s, and the current really rips through there, and 7 people drowned. So yeah, I mean, obviously just a tragedy, and that happened just a little while ago. So that was weird that I was anchored right next to the ferry, you know, like a quarter of a mile away when I was reading that. It was just, yeah, it was kind of surreal. But it sounds like an interesting place. Hopefully they get all of their issues settled there. I know there's lawsuits going on between the original community and then I guess the county that's doing the developing. So I don't know. You know, I try to be positive and upbeat. I probably shouldn't have mentioned any of this. You know, sometimes you learn some crap about places, and sometimes you learn some really neat things about places. So yeah, it's I guess it's kind of the same as with everywhere. There's fights between the old and the new, and I don't know. Seems like there could be a better way to handle that. But that's all I'll say about that. And that's all we have time for this week. I would like to give a massive shout out to my Patreon crew. Without your guys' support, I wouldn't make these videos. And my Patreon crew is Joan and Juddy Judnick, Val and Chris Alcorn, Denise and Eli Sackett, Sherry Erickson, Deb Shaw, Matthew Spotton, Peter Allen, and Natalie Linehan. Thank you guys so very much. Your support really means the world to me. I do have one legacy patron member, and her name is Joan Linbo. Unfortunately, she has passed on, but she lives on in our hearts forever. We really miss you, Joan. If you are interested in joining our Patreon crew, there is a link in the description down below, and that'll take you to our Patreon page where you can sign up. And there are hundreds, literally hundreds of extra videos and photos of our travels, and I try and keep everything there up to date and post at least once or twice a week, so it gives you a little peek behind the curtain. If you do like our videos, please like, comment, and subscribe. That'll help us out more than you'll ever know, and that actually doesn't cost you anything, so hit that like button. Alrighty, I hope you all are well, and we'll see you next week.